Yeah, it just stepped out. Oh, right, oh, okay. He's coming back. I hope so. Is that right? Yeah. Sorry. See the next one. I get your attention.
Well, we're thinking about all of this and still not quite time to get started yet. We're going to need, well, it's right on time. We're going to need note takers and jabber scribes. So who would like to to volunteer? We only have a small group to choose from. Huh?
I didn't bring a laptop.
I didn't either, and that's why I'm having trouble downloading these or uploading these slide sets. Okay. Anybody want to do jabber?
I'll see if I can make it work on my phone.
I can give you my iPad if you can make it work on that.
It's not the screen size, it's the downloading. Lou, have you got a laptop that connects to Jabber correctly?
I do.
Could you Jabber scribe?
Sure. There's a blue sheet I can.
Oh, yeah, I'll start the blue sheets around. Rick will start the blue sheets around. Okay, well, welcome to Manet. We'll probably walk through this slowly. First things first, I apologize. I'm Stan Ratliff, by the way, one of the chairs of Manet. My co-chair is not here this time around. I apologize. I do not have an agenda slide in the note well. That's my error. It got caught up in other things like me trying to get here on airplanes and that kind of weird stuff. So I apologize for that, but we do have a note taker. We do have a jabber scribe identified. And we didn't really have an agenda until a couple of days ago when Lou mentioned some discussion around DLEP and multicast, DLEP support for multicast, which I think is a really good thing for us to talk about. And then Ronald has some slides, and that's great. The more the merrier. I see our AD is not yet here. So I don't know, what is the protocol? Should we proceed with our AD not being here, or should we hold? Okay, we should proceed. I wanted to note with document status first that the multi-hop forwarding extension has now been published as RFC 8629. Congratulations to the authors. That leaves us with just a handful of documents that are currently active in the group. And most of them are in last calls or in IESG evaluations. Specifically, the latency extension is in IESG. The lid extension is waiting for an updated ID. And the pause extension is actually in the editor queue. So it will be coming out shortly. As far as the other three documents go, the flow control, the diff serverware credit windows, and the traffic classification stuff, they've been in last call for quite some time. I think it's time to close out the last call and advance them towards publication. But I'll do that on the mailing list. I'll ask for one more round of potential comments. And then based on that, we will close out those last calls and start trying to push them forward.
Rick Taylor, quick question. I know with the credit windowing and the credit extension stuff, there was some debate about the authorship because there was the original drafts about credit windowing that were part of DLEP, then got removed from DLEP, and the diff server where credit windowing sort of brought the ideas back. Has that all been resolved? Because I thought there was some question that all got fixed.
I thought it had.
Cool, just checking. Yeah. Everyone's nodding, so fine.
Yeah, at least as far as I know, it was indeed resolved. Okay, so that's where we're at on the document status. The other thing that I profusely apologize for, I don't have a slide set for, is the note well, but please note that this meeting is covered by IETF's note well. So take that into consideration as you make comments at the mic or comments over Jabber, that this is covered by the note well. And having said that, I think once we're ready, I think
You go to the page, materials page.
Okay. Reload this page.
Go to menu.
Okay.
So the other tab.
Do I? No, I'm
Oh,
on
yeah. Go to the.
I'm on the meeting agenda here.
No, just go to the group tab you had, the other tab you got.
Oh,
It's in there.
it's in here?
I think it's
Meetings?
Yeah, it would be the meeting agenda, I would think.
Search for.
Yeah, we are Tuesday. No? Yes. There.
Click meetings on that page.
Click me.
And 105 materials.
It's sad that I'm having to have somebody talk me through this.
You have to log in.
Come on.
It makes you feel better. I'm a chair in 3 working groups. So.
At least you only have one login for 3.
Yeah.
So slides. Slides.
You have to click approve.
Don't disapprove.
Yeah, I hereby disapprove of the discussion. I hereby disapprove of your slides that I really wanted to see. Come on.
You hit the wrong button.
Oh, I hit the wrong button. Okay.
Hit the left side of that. On that
I will go back.
Left. Go to the left.
Go to the left.
All the way to the left. There you go.
Okay. Making this harder than it has to be, but that's me. It's usually what I do. Where is the slideshow?
It's over here. Present. And then click that button.
Click this one?
Sorry.
Took it
Just
back.
click present one time. Yeah. I'm sorry. That was my bad.
Okay. So I will hand the floor over. Oh, our AD is now present, Mr. Alvaro Rotana. So I will turn the floor over to Mr. Berger.
Hi, I'm Lou Berger. This is based on a discussion that it started with some offline discussions with Dave Wiggins, who has an open source implementation. Next slide, please. Who has an open source implementation published up on GitHub. And now back one. Yeah, you went 2. Oh, no. Okay, well, anyway, this is based on some implementation questions and experience. And it started with the discussions with Dave Wiggins, who hopefully is online, by the way. We have him online? No, we don't. I was hoping he would jump in. And then we came up with some answers. I felt a little more comfortable with them than David did, but I said since I'm the one who shows up here, that I would ask the RFC 8175 authors what they thought, But we also didn't want to bias the answer, so we didn't give our answers. The cool thing is they came up with exactly the same answers that we came up with. So that was really nice. If it was different, would have been okay too. I do think David had the point that if you do a strict reading of the document, it doesn't support necessarily everything that we have here. And so he thinks it's important to get the clarification. I think the first two questions they're not 100% clear, but I think the intent is there. So I think we could do that with an errata. The last one is definitely not clear. I think is beyond the intent of the document, but it also turns out not to take any change in the protocol formats to support it. But since really it's going beyond the intent, I think a small document that doesn't update is the right answer. And since we're going to be there, rather than do A and B in our errata, might as well just do the whole thing in a small document.
Rick Taylor here. Talking of errata in RFC 8175, someone, his name eludes me, pointed out that there is another inconsistency in 8175. There are two sections which contradict each other. I suggested he raised an errata. He never did. To be honest, I'd spotted that as well post-publication. So there is at least one other potential. Well, it is an errata. I'll raise it.
I see a co-author joining the potential document here. Yes, you. Don't turn around.
Just checking behind me.
Yeah. So, if we're going to throw together a document that gives clarifications to the document, as well as how to cover all of these cases, might as well do that in one. So we'll add a fourth one there. So this is really the overview slide. Now there's a bunch of detail. The next slide, actually, everything in the micro font, is italicized, is excerpts from the RFC. So it's just taken from 8175. And there are a couple of things that I think are really interesting here. There are some behaviors that are pretty clearly defined. So that's great. So that's the easy part. But there's some things that you have to go and interpret. Like, for instance, that where do you carry a multicast address? Well, it does say that it's just a destination. It's a logical destination, and so it can be treated as a destination. Generally, that means a MAC endpoint, a MAC destination. Well, what about the IP addresses?
The IP addresses are carried in the IPv4 and IPv6.
Yeah, but
TLBs.
So where do you carry the IP multicast addresses? Is that explicit? It's not.
Okay. Yes, I agree.
You can infer, but it's not stated.
Yeah, so Rick Taylor again. It's important, and this is why the DLEP lid draft exists, is that fundamentally RFC 8175 DLEP talks about a destination is defined by its layer 2 MAC address. So yeah, you can have traditional broadcast MACs, and you can use, and it eludes me what specification it is, the encoding of multicast addresses with the multicast MAC OUI.
Yeah.
And so, but it is specifically MAC, not generally. It is absolutely specific.
Right, but is there an expectation that the real multicast IP address is going to be carried in any of the messages?
I think it's in as a should.
I think it's not specified. I think it's implied.
IPv4 and IPv6.
You think Alvaro is telling me I'm wrong, and I believe him.
No, I think I agree with you.
Oh, okay. So I think I think in this case the intent can be read, but sometimes, like in a specification, it's good to be explicit.
Oh,
so
I agree. Yeah,
so
I'm
I
not
think
disagreeing.
I think that part actually would qualify as an errata, as we really meant this, and you can read it that way, and it would be good if you just add the word multicast. I don't think is a major change, and that's certainly how the implementation that we're referring to expects it to be used, as multicast. Even David, who had the issue of saying things are a little not as specific as they should be, didn't have that issue.
I'm Laura Thunder Road, Andy. So I'm not sure exactly, you said a lot of words that could be in an errata.
Yes.
The way I see an errata is you forgot a word, or the word is misspelled, or, you know, instead of saying or multicast, it should have been and multicast, or, you know, whatever. The explanation that you seem to be giving seems to me that it wouldn't fit in an errata.
Well,
I think
maybe I shouldn't harp on the errata or not, because the end result is because we have problems A, B, C, and now we heard D, and problem C. Yeah, so well, C is definitely not an errata.
So you
So-
would have to go do something.
We're gonna have to do something anyway, so I should stop. My proposal in the end, when I get there, is I was trying to work up to it, so I should just skip there. Is that we do a small document that clarifies all these points, and
Yeah,
it's one document. I wouldn't do it as a BIS. I don't think it's enough of a whole revision of the protocol. I don't think we have enough experience to do that yet. I would do it as a small document that lists that as an update to 8175.
Yeah, this is Stan Ratliff. I will also say on this first one, you can't do it in an errata with a word, but you can do it with about one sentence, which is the multicast addresses must be carried with the following TLBs.
Either way, we're going to end up in the same point as we're going to have this other document. So I don't think we have to spend a lot of time on it. And, you know, if we're going to have that document, we might as well put everything in there to clarify the whole situation, because then people don't have to notice how many places they go look. They just look at one additional place. And we do an update. So it updates so that 8175 says, go read here if you're going to implement it, and you're done. And it's one document. So point number 2, by the way, would be, I don't know, an errata or not. Sorry, I guess I shouldn't say that again. The point number 2 is really fun. So it says a modem needs to expect multicast addresses are in a destination up request. Guess what? There isn't a destination up request.
That's right, it's an announce.
So I do have a comment later that says, oh, we interpret this to mean the announce, and that was like some name change that just didn't get cleaned up. I'll point out that this is an informational text, so it's not really it's not a problematic, except you have to infer a little bit of what goes on.
Rick Taylor, just as a sort of point of historical interest for people, the destination announce came in very late in the drafting of DLEP. And previously ups could go both ways, and it got really confusing. So we renamed, and obviously this got missed in the search and replace.
Yeah, you'll have to blame your reviewer. You have to blame your reviewer for not catching it. This is how I ended up in DLEP, by the way, was reviewing this stuff. Yeah, I think this is enough on background. Next. So from the 3 questions, we have the Stan's answer cut and paste from some private email, by the way, with permission. And then the results of the offline discussions, including with Stan, Rick, and David. So, you know, there's the question, here's the text, but really what it comes down to is, how does a receiver identify itself? And this is the classic thing of IGMP joins and leaves. How do you do that simple thing? It's really important that we support that. What do we do? And I think we all have came up with the same conclusion. By the way, the implementation has a little issue here of once you've done, I'm trying to remember the exact issue, but it was like once you had done a message in one direction, it wasn't expecting it in the other, and it rejected it. And so I'm looking at Rick because I know he's using this code. So you've probably hit this code and maybe even have a pull request to fix it. All right, so anyway, how do we do joins? That's the most basic thing. Destination announces is what everyone agrees on. We agree that was the intent of the document, that the multicast MAC is the MAC based on the RFC you were just talking about, that neither of us remember the name, but the number, excuse me, that says if you have an IP multicast address, how you map it into a multicast MAC address. So that's that MAC address. We do believe you want to have a multicast address list, because the way that mapping works is you can have multiple IP multicast addresses map into the singleton. So we think that's a list. And by the way, when you update the list, I put the comment on other slides. I missed it on this one. This is a list that is a complete list of all the groups. So let's say you had group A and B that map to the same MAC address, and you join with A, and you now want to add B. You would have to send an announce with A and B. Now, let's say you want to remove A. You have to send an announce with just B. So it's sort of like these old soft state protocols, and that you had to, well, and IGAP is soft state, so, you know, it sort of makes sense. But so that's the full list. And the router will send its complete understanding, and the modem has to infer the delta.
Stu Card, Critical Technologies. If you're actually going to put some of those words in there as clarifications, they may end up being obfuscated.
Obfuscated. It's all
Yeah,
right.
thank you. Because semantically, that's a join/leave, the destination announce. And the destination down is not a leave, it's a leave all.
Right.
Okay? So we want
Right. And in fact, I have that on the slide, and for some reason, I have it on the next slide, but not on this slide. It's really annoying. I don't know why I didn't do that.
Rick Taylor again. I don't know, because I haven't got DLEP in front of me at the moment. If you sent an announce with a multicast MAC and a single multicast IP address, and then sent another announce with the same multicast MAC and a different multicast single address, whether the modem should assume that is just an addition because you haven't retracted the previous add.
How do you retract? How do you retract?
Exactly, apart from, as Stu just said, the down is a retract all.
Right.
Because there's an add remove indicator on the IP address.
Yes,
TLP.
there is.
So.
Oh, you're right.
Yes.
So I'm wrong.
You could.
So
no,
I'm
I'm
no,
not sure
you're
you're
right.
entirely wrong.
So this is why we have to write it down.
Yeah.
No, I think I'm wrong.
I think we're heading rapidly towards a multicast considerations for DLEP document, which.
Yeah. This
Yeah.
is great. You know, I did the slides quickly, and obviously I blew that. I mean, it doesn't change the slide; it changed the narrative.
Yeah.
So I blew my narrative. The slide's perfect. Just like the RFC, right? Anyway. So, yeah. So I mean, that's the nice thing about writing a new document is we're going to be very methodical about it and make sure we get it right and make sure all the details are there. So this is highlighting that we need that. I think you're right that there is the add drop already in there and that's the right way to solve this problem.
Rick, again, just continuing, but it's not, I don't believe it's explicitly called out an announce add followed by an announce add with a different IP address on the same MAC. I don't think that behavior is clarified.
Oh,
anywhere.
and in fact, I would think that what you would do is send one message that adds and drops.
Yeah, but what happens if I've got one multicast address I'm interested in because I'm the router, and then
This is receiver. This is the receiver.
Sorry, yes. So the modem receives something from the router.
No, so I'm a router.
Yeah. So the router is.
I joined someone upstream,
Yeah.
downstream of me
Someone
has joined,
Yeah, and
I want to
tell the
join.
modem-
right?
Yeah. Well, what you're telling the modem is, I am interested in.
I'm a
this.
listener.
I'm a listener for this. So you request information through the announce message for this first IP address.
You're doing a listen. You're doing a join
doing
or
a
a listen. That's
Sure. And then sometime later, another request comes in
Sure.
for a second IP address
that happens to collide.
that happens to collide.
Yes.
I'm not sure it's clear anywhere in the document that I can't just send an incremental add effectively. So I just say add for the new
I
one.
accept what you're saying.
Yep.
And this is something that we have to describe. And
Yeah.
whatever we describe will be the definition.
Okay, agreed.
And I'm going to look at David's code and see what it does today, by the way. But
Okay, you ready?
I talked about join. Leave, as was mentioned by Stu, who I don't know, but nice to meet you, is that since we only have a multicast MAC in the destination down, you only do that on the final leave. So it's only when you have no more listeners. Next. All right. Now on the other side, how does a sender know that there's a multicast group out there with any listeners? I'm not saying who's listening. I'm just saying any listeners. And what are the right parameters there? What are the service parameters related to that? So this comes to that message that we talked about. That is we already talked about the up and downs. So we think the spec is pretty clear that destination up is intended to cover this. It has in it, the spec talks about logical destinations. The destination up is identified as having a destination address, which we know is this case a logical one is what the spec uses, but in our case it's the multicast MAC. And then there's a list of associated IP addresses. It doesn't explicitly say multicast, but we think it goes there. We all agree that that was the intent. So that's pretty clear. Excuse me. Then we can get a destination update to handle the add drop case. And I believe you're right with the flag. And so I think that also falls out of intended semantics. And the last thing we have is destination down. And here's the comment, which is it's only when the final listener leaves. So that's when there's no one out there on the far side. And again, we think that this was the intent. Reading it before I even asked the question of the authors, we thought this was the intent. They came back and basically said, this is the intent. I do have it captured in like 2 slides, but Rick made the point that a destination may be a broadcast address. And from our standpoint, we were just thinking multicast and broadcast, a special case. Okay, so this one's also pretty straightforward. The next one's more interesting. How do you know what endpoints are reachable? Because you sort of want to know that in this type of network. It's because since you're on an RF channel, someone might be moved so distant that they are not going to get the packet, and you can't assume it's like a broadcast media. You can't assume it's like a LAN where just because one person is joined, everyone's going to be able to hear you, and which is part of a basic design principle in IGMP, any version. We probably need this information. How do we do it? Well, as we saw before, there's the IP address list that was unqualified in both the up and the update. And I added the qualification that it's multicast. It doesn't say that, it just says list. So there's no reason why that list can't be first multicast and then unicast IP addresses. And I think, yeah, Stan, I thought you were going to call it a hack, but I might have responded this as pretty hacky, or you might have responded as pretty hacky. One of us said it feels a little hacky. The nice thing is you don't have to change the syntax. I do believe it's a change in semantics and an unintended one.
I went for inelegant as opposed to it's a hack.
Okay. We'll go with that. It's inelegant. And it is a win that you don't have to go change your encoding, but I do think it's a change in code. And I actually view that this is of everything we've talked about, this is the most significant change, even though it's not a change in encoding on the wire. And it's such a change, I think it would need to be documented and go through the normal process.
Stu Card again. I'm assuming that those 2 bullets there on destination up and destination update are intended to be conceptually clear as opposed to intended to say, yeah, this is what the parameter list is really going to look like, because a multicast IP address is distinguishable from a unicast IP address. So there's really only one parameter there, which is an IP address list.
Correct. And in fact, that's what's in the document. And that's what I was suggesting. That was sort of everyone understood it was both unicast and multicast, but it doesn't say that. It would have been better to have said that. But you're absolutely correct. This is conceptual. This is not actual.
Just want to make a comment there, and this is Stan again. If we do that, we just need to be careful of the destination up would be focused on one multicast IP address at a time and the listeners for that multicast IP address. Otherwise, you could introduce some ordering issues inside the TLB list that we wanted to stay away from.
I actually don't see what you're talking about there, because as the previous comment said, Stu said that we can readily identify IP multicast from unicast. And there's no reason why you can't have N multicast addresses and N unicast addresses, and there could be any order. Now, there's one point there, subtlety there is if you wanted to say that the groups had different sets of listeners.
Correct. That would be the issue. You would lose
Do you want to have, so I didn't mean to imply, I actually intentionally didn't want to imply and listed it this way to provoke
the discussion we're having right now?
No, to imply that you didn't get that information. That semantically, we didn't provide the information of which listeners were listening to which IP multicast address. And maybe that's wrong. Maybe my perspective is wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, Rick again. I didn't quite understand that last point, Lou. Can you?
Do you want to understand who is subscribed to the individual multicast addresses, or do you want to understand who is the union of multicast addresses and it's separately the union of listeners?
I would say the former, but either way, that has to be clarified.
Fine.
Hi, Ron Infeld. I may be very confused, but in IP multicast, the sender never knows who's listening, as far as I can tell.
On a subnet level, routers know who the listeners are in most routing protocols, or in many routing protocols. Not the hosts, but the routers. You know who your downstream router is.
Hello, Ratana. So I have a similar so I understand what you're trying to do. Are you assuming that the senders and the receivers are the DLEP routers?
Yes.
Not someone behind the DLEP router?
Correct.
That wants to subscribe?
Correct.
I mean, you said IGMP several times, right? So I'm assuming that there could be someone behind the DLEP router
Yes.
that somehow joins
Yes.
to some group over there.
Yes.
And now me, the DLEP router, gets to join, the IGMP join, translates that into something,
Right.
and now we go to the other
I'm
side.
translating my
Where-
I'm translating my PIM behavior into a subnet DLEP.
Yes, but so
behavior.
you're translating the actual IGMP message.
No, my
into
PIM
join.
behavior. It's your PIM behavior.
That's just a behavior.
Right.
So, okay, so what happens if I actually get an IGMP join? Nothing happens.
Well, what does PIM do? You have to go to your routing protocol.
Right.
So you're a router, right? So you have IGMP to host, and you may have IGMP on your subnet, but you're running PIM or BGP stuff or other magic stuff between your routers, right?
Okay, so you're just trying to do this for the DLEP subnet, whatever that
It's
is.
exactly for the DLEP subnet. And some routing protocols need to know what the listeners are.
Stu again, and it's probably foolish for someone who is as ill prepared as me to be speaking as much as I am, but
That's awesome. Thank you.
can I infer from what you said a few minutes ago that the destination up and destination update messages may propagate to different groups of listeners depending upon which multicast group we are talking about? Because if
Okay, so these messages, can we go back one? So
Okay.
yeah, that's good. So the No, one more.
Back or forward?
Back. So the first thing let's trace this through the subnet. You have listeners that say, hey, I'm listening. Magic happens on the subnet, on the radio subnet, to tell other people that there's listeners out there. I say magic because DLUT, that's outside the scope of DLUT. But it's not outside the scope of other routing protocols in this group. It is outside the scope of my knowledge from a radio standpoint. I don't know what happens there. But that information propagates. It now propagates across the air, and it goes to other radios or other modems. Next. Which then want to tell their attached routers that there's a possible destination that they can send to. There's a possible MAC destination that's out there that they can send to. And that's done through this mechanism. And it tells you which MAC addresses and which IP multicast groups are available. That's what this is doing. But it doesn't tell you those endpoints. It just says these groups are out there. Now, let's say the four of us are on a network. And everyone is subscribed to this one group. These the first two guys are closer to me, left and right. If I send, they're going to hear me. But you're too far away. You're not going to hear me. How does I as a sending router know that? How do I know that maybe I have to do something different? I can't assume it's just going to be delivered to you. That's the next slide.
I may be reading too much into
Go to that
your question, Stan, about focusing it on one particular multicast group at a time. But if I'm not reading too much into your comment or question, whichever it was, then there is a need to know argument here that goes to both scalability and privacy issues. If there are a number of nodes that need to know that I'm listening on a particular multicast group, they do not all necessarily need to know all of the multicast groups that I am listening on.
So I'm assuming that this is operating inside a single routing domain, a single control domain. In routing protocols, you tend to push around the information of, at least who your next hops are. Maybe not everyone in the network. And that's just what we're doing here. So in terms of privacy, I don't think the privacy is any different than the routing protocol in any other domain. In terms of scalability, this has different scalability properties than you would have on a traditional LAN. But I think the problem is you're not on a traditional LAN. And so your protocols that are designed to operate on a traditional LAN and make assumptions, they're going to assume that there's delivery in the case that there's not. And so since you're dealing with this lossy medium, you have to accommodate it. And that's what this is all about.
This is Stan again. I'd like to go back to the example you were talking about earlier, where you were on a DLEP subnet. You can see Rick as a router. You can see me, but you can't see Stu. And you're trying to figure out as a sender how to cope with that.
Well, I said I couldn't reach him for multicast.
Right. But
but he might show up as an endpoint for unicast.
Yeah.
If this is contrived and doesn't make sense from your favorite radio technology, I accept that because I'm not a radio guy. I am making this up. I admit it.
Okay. I was just going to say that seems to me like it's a problem that has to be solved, but you, the sender, it's kind of like the classic hidden terminal problem, right? It's not your problem to solve. It's mine and Rick's to realize that Stu's back there and he can't hear. So we've got to propagate forward.
Wait, so let's change the topology. You guys are in front of me. Stu's over there.
Right.
So you can't solve the problem either.
Well, if he's over there far enough that you can't see him or you can't hear
No,
each other.
I hear him fine. I hear him fine as a unicast sender, but I can't reach him as a multicast.
Right. There are cases there where that's just broke. I don't know how to fix that. right?
For the benefit of the microphone, Rick, I was just clarifying to Stu that the privacy issue we're kind of sidestepping by saying DLEP talks about single layer 2 domains. So it's all about just one small LAN. This information isn't propagating out over some extended network, and that allows us to kind of sidestep those privacy issues he raised.
I would sidestep it as saying you're inside a single administrative domain. You know.
Yeah.
So I think this is the last question I had. So now we're going to move on to some other points that came up. Rick, do you want to come up and talk to your?
You're doing a great job summarizing.
I don't know what Rick was saying here, so I don't think this. No. I think my main takeaway from here, whether it was Rick's point or not, is that when you say multicast, we really want to make sure we include broadcast in there too. And I think it's a completely valid point, and I completely agree. I don't know if there was any other points you wanted to make on the slide.
No, that was
Okay. Next. Now, this is something that's come up a couple of times. I'm throwing it in here to foster discussion. It is not my discussion, so I don't want to lead it. In fact, from my standpoint, I'm not sure I care about this, but then again, I can see that there are uses of PIM, and I'm a dense mode fan, so I'm not a sparse mode fan. But that's why I said I don't care about it. It's not that I don't care about multicast. It's that I'm not a fan of RPs, and I'm not RPs that are unaware of what's happening at the power at the subnet level for like power distribution, right? Because you don't.
This is Stan again. Let me give you an example of, at least in my case, where this started, and that's that in some satellite systems, you have the notion of what's called a network controller node for the satellite. So at layer 2, you have a really important box there, and we started with the really vague notion of trying to communicate the fact that from a layer 2 perspective, this modem is somehow special. It has capabilities that don't necessarily exist elsewhere in the network. For the network controller, it's pretty obvious. You're guaranteed to have, in a satellite network anyway, you're guaranteed to have connectivity to all the downstream points. And then we kind of started monkeying around with different use cases from that, kind of flowed from that. So I don't know that this is actually coalesced as an idea, but it's one that we've been talking about.
It's very typical in routing protocols to have an ability to discover capabilities about other nodes in the network. And I think you're saying you want DLEP to help you in that regard.
Yeah, and I want DLEP to help me with, not only am I as a router extra capable, but perhaps my modem is as well.
Yeah, so to me, this becomes anyone remember PNI augmented routing PAR, right? This is like PAR, where you could, the higher level could inject some information into the lower level routing protocol or lower level and basically provide a distribution and discovery function. So you could advertise some bits in, and then everyone else is out there learns about those bits without you exchanging any other information.
Right.
So,
Rick,
I mean, because you could just do this over.
Where we were going with this.
Oh, okay.
So one of my use cases was, there are a number of routing protocols and data dissemination protocols and so on out there, which you have a leader in order to maintain consensus
Sure.
of that data. So you have a leadership election, and you go read the papers on this thing, and it's great. And they say, pick the node with the lowest node ID. Great, he'll be the leader today, and when he fails, go to the next guy. The problem is, if you're running on some of these mesh radio systems or a hub and spoke SATCOM system, the guy with the lowest node ID might be in a tunnel, and clever hidden terminal stuff is keeping that layer 2 going. So this is an ability for the modem to report back to the radio to say, I am not a good guy to be elected the leader because I'm fighting really hard to even stay connected. Please don't make me the broadcast point, when you're multi-unicast overlay stuff. And we went on from that to say the router being able to suggest to the modem that he was thinking about becoming one of these leaders, and for the modem to be able to say, no, I don't think that's a good idea. Also, that was the concept we were playing around with, is so that the modem can say, in the view you have at layer 3, that seems like a good idea, but where I am down at layer 1, layer 2, that's a bad idea. Or the opposite. Hey, I am the spoke of the SATCOM system. I'm running in a dirty great data center. Make me the leader. I'm a good candidate.
Why is this not like just one of the other resource parameters that are already there? I don't remember all of that. But why isn't this just like I'm low latency, I have good bandwidth, I have good signal quality? Why isn't it any different than that?
Because I have good bandwidth, I have good latency, that's fine, because the climatic environment is great. We're on a nice, clear, sunny day, and we all can see each other because we're on a flat plane. It's, particularly with some of the more complex meshing radio systems, they're already building trees. They have the idea of, they're doing their internal tree building to keep the RF system running. If the head of that tree can say, hey, I'm the head of the tree, if I'm having to broadcast, if you're building an overlay network, use me as the head of your tree because I am already a tree. I'm already a root node.
I hate to step in, but I just want to ask the group, we're starting to get close on time. We've only got about 13 minutes left.
13?
About 13. Ronald has a
I didn't realize we were such a short session. I'm done.
It was just an hour session. So do you want to continue? Does the group want to continue on this topic? Do we want to hear the other topics?
Personally, I'd like to hear what he has to say.
I would too.
All right.
So.
I didn't realize we were so short. Sorry. Thank you. I really appreciate it. So I think the outcome from this, the takeaway is we should work on the document on the 4 topics. This one is a separate thing that Rick and Stan will run with.
Right.
And I think at least Rick wants to participate in this multiple cast clarifications document. Stan, are you in?
like to as well, yes.
Awesome. Can I get one of you guys to take the first draft at it?
Yes, you can. I will volunteer.
Awesome. Love that. Thank you.
I'm not seeing your slides, Ronald.
Try reload. Control R.
I did. Oh.
Did you do the right group?
It says MANET.
No. Did you do the right group?
Just go to the moment to see if there's pending. Sure. There we go.
Sure.
You have to approve them. This is a good topic.
So, hi. I'm Ron Infeld. I work for TNO, the Netherlands. I appreciate being given the time, and especially now that we are in the middle of an interesting discussion that we may want to continue at some other time. But on the other hand, this discussion is about DLAP, and it's, in my feeling, straying more and farther and farther away of what originally the MANET working group was about. So I tried to just throw in an idea and gauge if there's any interest for people in the room or in the mailing list to work on this. And what I want to work on personally is connecting different manets together in a situation where you have multiple different manets potentially running different MANET routing protocols, whatever. Internally, these MANETs could be using one or more types of radios. Obviously, if they're ever going to talk to each other, they have to have a common radio, common waveform. But not all the nodes within a MANET have to have this extra radio, modem, whatever. So a subset has this, and that can be used to form some kind of coalition or some kind of federation of MANETs. And then they need to be able to exchange routing information with each other. If a node from one MANET is ever going to speak to a node in another MANET. So you could think of a large-scale disaster recovery operation with several parties involved. And that's the usual euphemism. I'm not going to say any more about that. Next slide, please.
Okay, or your clicker will work if you want to do that.
Yeah, I always get this wrong.
Well, just because I know we're going to run short on time.
Yeah.
Go back to your key question. So I think this is exactly what Pascal, I'm going to butcher his name, so I won't say it, Lafergie, who is trying to get at with the whole raw and paw activity. There was a BOF on it last meeting. He didn't get his BOF material in on time, so it's a side meeting on Thursday morning at 8:30. And what he's talking about what he really is focused on DetNet over wireless. But I think he really wants this, what you're talking about here.
Okay.
So I think there's others who care about this who are not in the room.
Rick Taylor, who's in the room, I really care about this. You and I have had side conversations about this for a while, so I'm just adding a public +1 to this, whether it's raw paw, whether it happens in MANET or whatever. This is important because MANETs are kind of bigger these days.
Okay, this may be obvious. It's a MANET.
College, I also agree. This is important work.
Okay. So MANETs have a tendency of splitting and merging if everyone is driving around, walking around. You have these gateway nodes who are the potential connection points. You can pre-select them, or they can be dynamically selected by some mechanism. Obviously, they run 2 or more MANET routing protocols. You could use flat route redistribution, but you have to be careful there. And we have some experience here. Before you know it, you have a routing loop. And the other idea is to have some kind of, we could call it overlay protocol, or an exterior gateway protocol, so to speak, for MANETs. Typically, in the wired world, you use BGP to connect autonomous systems, and the autonomous systems are running IGPs. But that's not very suited. There's ample literature about how BGP is not going to work in a MANET situation. So we need something new. And again, in literature, this has been explored to some extent, but there are no usable implementations at the moment. And most of the papers are very sketchy about how to exactly do it. These are a few references. There are more. So my question to the working group is there any interest to do this work? And that would start, I guess, with writing a problem statement, see what's already out there, and then possibly write a protocol specification, which in the first instance may aim for experimental status.
Rick Taylor, I would go straight for proposed standard if we're going to bother to do this. I think there's enough experimental out there. You quote the academic papers, and I'm always a little wary from an implementer perspective of experimental RFCs. They're great,
Right.
they're educational, but I think we should aim standards track if we're going to do this.
That's fine with me too. I have no, yeah. I tried to. So, and then, yeah, this is not in the charter at all, so we probably need to go through some rechartering thing. And that's all.
Hi, Alvaro Rotana, Ravagiti. I love new work. Let's start there. But I'm also of the opinion that you can tweak any routing protocol to do anything you want. So before we start down the road of defining a new routing protocol, let's see what we have and if there's anything that we can do with what we have, right?
Makes sense.
And yes, there's proposal, whatever, all those things. Yes, we would need to recharter. I am incredibly happy. You can't imagine how much when I walked into this room and saw 12 people sitting here. Because this is probably the biggest attendance we've had in the last 2 years combined, right? For all the last meetings in the last 2 years. So I'm saying all this because, yes, we would need to recharter. We need to have not just the words in the charter, we need to have the energy in the working group as well. So, what I would say is what I would like to see is, discussions in the group in this direction.
Yes.
As we get closer, yes, we can recharter the working group. The working group was already chartered to do OSR and whatever, so we could do something else, right? When we get there, I would not want to recharter before we see the thrust of the going.
And I apologize for not having brought this up earlier and on the mailing list as I should have, but I was involved in other things.
Rick Taylor again. The cynic in me would say that if there's a non-working group forming BOF full of great ideas meeting on Thursday morning and they have sufficient momentum to work on it and it's similar to this, then rather than forming a new working group, isn't that a bunch of active participants and some strong ideas that could recharter an existing working group and bring it all here? Otherwise, we're just the DLEP working group. Sorry.
Lou Berger, so that, I may have mischaracterized what Thursday is. It's a side meeting. So it's not a BOF. It's not non-work. They wanted to, but they didn't get their act together. So they're gonna, if they want a working group, they're gonna have to go. They're gonna have to go through and get another BOF. I think their ideas are very interesting, and they're still in development. They're very much focused on the DetNet use case, which is a little different. It's not general reachability-based traffic. It's service-based. I do think there's a role for DLEP in there, and there may be a role for bringing these things together. I would suggest showing up there and hearing what they have to say and telling them where they should go if they're confused. And if it ends up here, that's fine. I think there is a big question about where that work ends up. And the most positive thing I can say about a new working group is maybe it'll bring more energy into the room. But if it's better to bring the energy into this room and hijack this working group, that works too. So there's lots of things. I don't think this is a decision that is now because they're going to have a BOF in Singapore. So there'll be a discussion after Singapore. Now, if you show up, you can understand, maybe help form their ideas a little bit better and align them to your interests. So I do think it's worth showing up there.
Will do.
Just even if you're just learning, and definitely the AD say it's probably worth showing up also. Particularly because it's currently an int area for some confused reason.
Thanks.
All right, any other comments, questions in the last 2 minutes that we have? Excuse me, 1 minute that we have. So, okay, thank you everybody for showing up. You have a minute of your lives back. Thank you for attending Manet.
So, justice is actually where it gets interesting.
Yeah.
And my only comment is,
Thank you, sir.
try
Appreciate it.
to die. Yes. You remember Manimo? You remember ZRP? You remember Torah?
These are extremely raw, need really quickly typing, so some things are missing, some things are maybe. I'm trying to make it as easy as possible.